You are in for an interesting ride.
Hello and welcome to another ETN Files interview with me, Joanna Summerscales. It's the 29th of November, 2021. Where has that year gone to? I'm delighted to invite Dustin Schutta back for a second interview. It seems he's been very busy acquiring more original photographs, which he is kindly going to share with us. Now, Dustin is from Wisconsin, and it seems that Wisconsin is an area that's something of a UFO hotbed. So we're going to look at some of the towns there, and these are going to include Dundee Mountain, Elmwood, Belleville, Colfax, Eagle River, Melon, and Barron. Then we're going to go across the pond to the UK and a very famous photograph, and then to Australia. We're then going to come back to New Mexico and talk about Paul Villa. Dustin has acquired quite a few photographs of those images that Paul Villa took in the 1960s, and they are, I think, quite amazing. So I hope you're going to enjoy this show. Over and out. See you in a minute. But first of all, as he had told me, there's quite a lot going on in his home area of Wisconsin. So we're going to start off with a look at some of the towns there. So shall we look at Dundee Mountain, and you can tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Dundee Mountain is probably the biggest hotspot in Wisconsin, in my opinion. It's been recording phenomenons probably like hundreds of years, from Native Americans calling it Spirit Hill. And yeah, there's been activity ever since until today.
And have you seen anything there yourself, Dustin?
I have not, but I did venture to the mountain myself and went up the trails. It's a beautiful area too, by the way. There's a campsite right below the mountain. So I like to go camping there sometime this summer.
Is it quite a well-known kind of, is it like a beauty spot as well as a UFO hotspot?
Yeah, just because of the nature reserve and the campsite there. There's lakes, there's Long Lake that's near there. And it's like an hour and 45 minutes away from Madison. So it's northeast of Wisconsin.
I know it's called a mountain. It looks more like a very large hill, but maybe it isn't.
It is.
You got it on the wrong thing. Oh my God, is this awesome?
Anyone want to take a look?
I got it. That's a UFO, no shit.
You want to look at this while I look through there a minute?
Yeah.
Here. Here. Oh, fuck, it's coming close. Good picture, Kevin.
Okay.
Filming? Wow, that was right overhead, Kevin.
That was incredible.
The bad thing is, you can't see.
It just disappeared.
Can you just give us a little overview about Elmwood and how far that is from you, if you have an idea?
I think Elmwood is about 3 hours away, and it's northwest of Wisconsin. They have been having UFO sightings probably like in the mid 1900s.
Yeah.
And just,
I believe they've got a little festival that they have as an annual event.
They have yearly events with decorating their cars like UFOs and dressing up like
a little
aliens.
floats and carnivals, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Well, we're going to have a look at an edited version of some footage of a 1987 festival of the UFO kind, and we'll see what the townsfolk of Elmwood have been enjoying themselves doing back in 1987.
It was saucer shaped. I could see the little legs on it, like little pods on the bottom. It got bigger and it got brighter.
So they were just alternating like that.
Residents recounting UFO sightings have become strangely familiar in Elmwood, a small western Wisconsin community whose residents have reported a whopping 100 UFO encounters in the last decade. At first glance, it looks like an army of aliens is overrunning Elmwood. Actually, the only invaders are thousands of curious visitors gathering for the town's annual UFO Day celebration, a 3-day extravaganza that pays tribute to the town's faraway friends. Elmwood calls itself the UFO capital of the world, and most say the town lives up to its billing. Where else do you see residents strut the latest in extraterrestrial fashion or cruise Main Street with famous aliens?
About the strangest date I've had in quite a while.
Dolores Radke is one of those who helped get the first UFO days off the ground a decade ago.
It's brought people to town. It's given us a spirit.
UFO Days brings back memories for residents like Hobbs Wilson, whose encounters a few years back brought him within 15 yards of 2 glowing objects.
What would happen if they'd land here? Would I get in with them or would I fight them? I decided to join the crowd and go with them and see what happens.
Hobbs Wilson, for one, is hoping for a second look at those UFOs that have captured the hearts and minds of an entire town. Rob Kryvik, News Center 13, Elmwood.
It just looks like it's a great community event.
It is. 2 other towns do exactly the same thing.
Oh, do they?
Yes, Belleville and Dundee also.
Let's have a little look at Belleville then.
Very small town.
Yeah, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what you know of Belleville in terms of its UFO experiences.
Back in 1987, 2 police officers happened to catch some lights in the sky and happened to chase it around town, and just were pretty blown away by their experience where they were reporting it as a UFO.
We've got, actually, courtesy of your research, a little bit of footage featuring Noah Voss, who's written a book also on Wisconsin UFOs, relates what went on in 1987, again, interesting time, and well, let's hear what he had to say.
Belleville, Wisconsin had a UFO sighting in January 1987. The UFO was actually witnessed by an officer, Belleville Police Department. He had a passenger ride along that night, and they actually were reporting seeing not necessarily an object, but more the lights. They were seeing multicolored lights off in the far off distance from the Quarry Road, just outside of Belleville. They ended up calling the Dane County Sheriff's Department, and the Dane County Sheriff's Department sent some officers, and they also witnessed the UFO. It was unidentified, it was flying, and it was an object apparently. The officers witnessed it for quite some time. They were calling around trying to get a radar confirmation. They actually ended up contacting the Madison Truax Airfield, and they were not able to detect anything on radar. They were actually doing some maintenance at the time. They weren't able to get a response from them. But they were able to contact Chicago O'Hare Airport, and the interesting thing about the sighting is they were actually able to get a radar confirmation that there was something in the sky that they were seeing. My name is Noah Voss. I am an author. The most recent book I have is UFO Wisconsin, a progress report. Details over 100 different reports of UFO phenomena right here from the state of Wisconsin.
Do you know Noah Voss at all?
I haven't met him personally. I follow him on Facebook, and I do have one of his books with
Maybe you
photographics.
could do a little field trip together. That would be good.
That'd be cool.
We're staying with the police sighting theme for a moment. And now we're going to go into a case that, again, from Wisconsin and a place called Colfax. Do you want to tell us what that case is about?
Mark Coltrane is a police officer in Colfax. It was April 10th, 1978, where he had his sighting where he was sitting in his car eating lunch, listening to the radio. Then he noticed his radio was crackling in and out, and he just happened to look into the sky and he saw this metallic object kind of zigzagging towards him, and he just happened to grab his camera that was sitting right next to him, jumped out of his car and started taking a series of photographs that I have. And Wendell Stevens actually investigated that personally, and I guess visited him and went and took him to that certain area where his car was sitting.
They're interesting photographs as well. Were there any other police brought in to investigate that along with, did Mark make a full report, do you know? Do we know anything about that?
Because I think he was in the outskirts of Colfax when he had a sighting. Yeah.
That's enough to give you a bit of indigestion, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, these things are so life-changing, aren't they? Just changes your point of view. Like you said about your sighting, it's like, oh my goodness, it's real. There's a case that I heard of a long time ago, and I'd actually forgotten about it, but you brought my attention to it. What's the place called?
Eagle River.
Eagle River, and this is a gentleman, I imagine he's in his 60s, called Joe Simonton. And I hadn't actually seen this footage, so thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, it was 1961, and he was just eating lunch in his kitchen, and he just happened to look out the window, and this flying saucer just gently came down like an elevator and landed on his property, and he walked out, and two men with penetrating eyes that he just couldn't like really look at him straight. They were asking for him for some water, and for the exchange for water, they gave him some look like pancakes. These little pancake looking things. So he had that, and he actually took a bite of one of them and said it tasted like cardboard. And he was just blown away that he had something physical. And he actually handed over his evidence to scientists, and they found out that they were regular buckwheat pancakes, but didn't have any trace of salt. So everything has a trace of salt in it. So just the fact that these did not, this kind of felt like they were out of this world.
Interesting, isn't it? And what he said was he just happened to look over and notice this other small person, sort of 5-footish, I think. And he said he noticed it making these pancakes on this, I don't know, this plate or grill or whatever it was. And he said he could see it was hot because he could see smoke coming, which is really interesting. And you think, you know, was there a little chimney on the UFO?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
But the fact is, you know, in the video, he takes them out of his pocket, these few pancakes, and he said, no wonder they're so small if that's all they're eating.
Right.
You gotta love it, haven't you? I love these characters. Great footage, and that's from a group of folks called Critical Past. So we thank them in advance for sharing their video. I couldn't find any other links to them. It's an incredibly neighborly, kind of benevolent encounter. Not that anything sort of came from it, but I'm sure that that changed his life forever as well.
All right.
Because as he said, he watched it go off at an angle and then suddenly shoot off. So back in 61, you can be sure that people wouldn't have seen anything in that.
Where do you meet someone from outer space? Perhaps in the North Woods. Joe Simonton of Eagle River, Wisconsin, spins a yarn about an April morning in 1961. A morning when, he says, he came face to face with another world.
Right here is where this flying saucer, this UFO, landed. Right here about where I'm standing. And it was a big, huge thing, and I wondered what the heck it was. And I looked out the window, and that's when I first saw this thing coming straight down, just like an elevator. And first I thought the roof went off of my house, and I thought, no, the roof is green, and this is bright. What the heck is it? So I rushed out to see what it was, and by that time there was a hatchway opening up in the top of it, just like the trunk of your car. And in there stood a little man, I say a little man, about 5 foot tall, holding up a jug or a container, and he motioned he wanted to drink. He motioned for water. So I walked up to him to get this jug, and I looked at his eyes, and they were so penetrating that I had to look away. And with that, I brought the water up, and he was looking at me when I first came out of the basement. But I didn't look at his face until I got right up to him. Then I looked up and I handed the jug up with both hands, and I had that same look in his eyes, a sort of a penetrating look. With that, he set the jug down, and he gave me a salute with the back of his hand, a gesture of thanks, I presume. And then, well, I gave him my salute. What am I going to do? I noticed this little man, the same size of a man, right to the right side of the hatchway, cooking these pancakes, which I have one here yet. He was frying these pancakes, and I pointed to him and made a gesture like eating. I thought maybe I'd get a conversation out of him. Nobody was saying anything. He didn't say a word. He just reached over and he got a handful of them, 4 of them, and he handed them down to me. And they were hot and greasy. And this man cooking these pancakes, it was on a square grill-like concern. I couldn't see any flame, but it seemed to be very hot. There was smoke coming from it. And if that was their food, God help them, because I took a bite of one of them, and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. And if that's what they lived on, no wonder they're small. And with that, he reached up and he closed his hatch with a heavy thud click like when it latched. And you couldn't a bit more see where that hatch was than you could see a hole in my hand. With that, the thing started to raise just like it came down. Everything was timed perfect. It went up about 20 feet. It tilted at 45 degrees straight south and shot off. And within 2 or 3 seconds, it was out of sight.
There's another place, I mean, Wisconsin is full of them, called Melon, which is the home, or was the home at least, to the Baker family, Philip Baker. And it's his story, well, his family's story. They all saw this craft. This one, again, completely out of the blue. Would you like to give us a bit of a lowdown on the Melon, Wisconsin incident?
Yeah, besides that being an amazing account, too bad they didn't get any pictures or video of that. The fact that they were kind of upset that they didn't have any footage or photographs, and they wanted to tell their friends and family without ridicule and whatnot. Yeah. Neighbors said that they wouldn't make up something like that.
And there is, I think the History Channel actually did a little bit of footage, which we won't use for copyright reasons, but it just shows Mr. Baker relating the story, and his daughter initially saw it, called her dad, called her family, and her dad actually walked right up into the area of where it was sitting on the road before it also took off. There was no personal encounter with any other beings from the craft. These encounters, sightings, profound sightings, Mr. Baker's sighting, that was close up and personal. The Mr. Simonton sighting is more than a sighting, it's an encounter. And these have been going on for so long. And these are ordinary, everyday folks just getting on with their lives. I can't believe how many sightings and events are happening in Wisconsin. I had no idea it was such a hotbed.
It's a treasure trove.
Mr. Baker, I'm just looking at my notes there, had actually called the undersheriff, a guy called George Ree, and whilst the craft had already gone by the time he came over, they knew something was going on because they'd had a second call seeing lights in the sky, and they brought in about 7 other deputies over 2 counties to go and chase these lights over the county and area. One of the set of the deputies actually had their car radio sort of go out and go off when the craft or the lights went overhead. So again, it's happening to people who are trained observers as well, like the police. So I thought we would have a little overview now of another very famous Wisconsin resident, and that's Coral E. Lorenzen, and along with her husband, who was Leslie Lorenzen, they set up APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, back in 1952. But would you like to tell the story of her sighting that actually started, I think, probably kickstarted her interest in the field?
Yeah, I think her sighting.
Yeah, it's 1934.
Yeah, she was 9 years old in Barron, Wisconsin, and she was out with some.
Back in 1934, aged only 9 years old, she had her own sighting, which kicked off her great interest. Quote, "I called it to the attention of my 2 playmates, and one said she thought it was a parachute. Its color was a glowing white. The object was about as large as a dime held at arm's length. There were no ropes or lines suspended from it, and therefore no parachutist. It could best be described as resembling an open umbrella without the ribs or spurs. It made no sound as it wobbled in a northwest direction across the clear, cloudless sky. It wasn't going fast, rather it was poking along at a leisurely rate of speed and with a rather strange motion that has been described in recent reports as undulating. We watched the object for perhaps 20 seconds. Then it appeared to go over the horizon, or perhaps it came to rest north of Barron, in the vicinity of a body of water referred to locally as the Upper Dam. I went home and told my father, who made inquiries, and the matter was dropped. And actually, the Lorenzens, the APRO organization, were instrumental in sidelining the Billy Meyer case, mainly because he would not give them exclusive access, citing it was for the world.
Why the Myers stuff was a hoax?
Okay. I think it might have been, not least, because Meyer would not give them an exclusive on access to the material, which Bob Brown mentioned.
That's right. That's right. Bob Brown did mention that.
Yeah. Let's take a step out of the US and let's head over to the UK. And would you like to tell us something about this picture? Because this is a very famous picture in the UFO field.
Yeah, so this guy and his daughter were at the park in 1964, May.
May 23rd.
Yeah, they were just out at the park taking pictures. And I guess when he went to develop those pictures, he saw that there was, looked like a spaceman right behind his daughter in one of those photos.
Yeah.
And I guess he went to I don't know if he went to authorities or went to somewhere higher up to try to get some more information. Even the Men in Black actually visited him too.
It's called the Solway Firth Spaceman photograph, and it was taken in 1964, May 23rd, in a place called Burr Marsh, which is just on the edges of the Solway Firth, and that's the body of water that separates the north of England from Scotland. Flatland, so easy to see. You know, there was no protuberances and no other elements in the environment that could account for what this was. And the guy who took the photograph was a fireman from Carlisle called Jim Templeton. He was out with his wife Annie and daughters Elizabeth and Frances, and he was taking a picture of 5-year-old Elizabeth in her new dress. So it made headline news in the Cumberland News in June, and so people saw the picture probably around the world. Then I think it was around about September, he had contact. I think they maybe even came to his house, as you were saying, two men in black. And interestingly enough, they refer to themselves by numbers, number 9, Mr. Number 9, and number 11.
I didn't know that.
What is quite interesting about that is that their home office here in the UK used to be known as Department 9, I'm reliably informed. So I don't know whether that's just a little clue as to where these folks could have come from or not. They asked or demanded that Jim Templeton take them to the site where the photograph was taken, where they set about doing quite a bit of measuring, until he said, well, you know, I didn't actually see the spaceman myself, it was only on the photograph, at which point they kind of apparently quite angrily got up from their measurings and went off, leaving him on the site. He had to make his own way back.
Oh my God.
So in the end, he just thought that maybe they were hoaxing people. I don't know. So you are now the owner of the original photograph of the Solway Firth Spaceman. How wonderful.
It is.
Very, very interesting stuff. I'm going to reference another thing that occurred that Mr. Templeton wrote to one of the major papers about, which was to do with an event involving a nuclear missile launch in, of all places, Woomera in Australia. what is fascinating about that is that he said that some people from the locale there, Woomera, had seen the photograph and said, oh God, that looks like two people who interrupted the launch of one of the Blue Streak missiles. And more of that later in the Hillary Porter interview, because there is something relating to a secret she is sharing for the first time, which directly relates to that. How amazing is that? Dustin, let's go further across the world and let's go to Australia.
Yeah, Eric Thomason.
These are excellent photographs.
Aren't they? Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just happened to be walking on the south end of the island of Australia, and he was on the beach, and he was just happened to have his camera, and out of the water came this flying saucer, and it just kind of started floating towards him, and then he noticed another smaller disc coming from the sky to meet up with the other disc, and it actually landed itself underneath it and went inside of it, and then it kind of flew over his head and just jetted off.
It seems that Mr. Thomason was actually on the beach early, about 6 a.m, and it was the Maslin Beach in southern Australia, and he was there to take some photographs for a photo competition. I wonder if he actually entered his UFO pictures into the competition, because they are astonishing. I mean,
they are.
And I hadn't heard
so
of
clear
them before. So thank you for sharing those original photographs. So thanks to Dustin. You know, you could think that they were almost a Billy Meyer shot. And this is a man called Paul Villa, or Apolinar Villa. And his shots and sightings, at least by camera, started in about 1963 onward. I think, can't remember if you had 5 or 6 meetings also, full-on encounters. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Paul Villa and his experiences.
Yeah, like you said, he was starting to have his experiences in 1963. And just like Billy Meyer, he would get telepathic messages to meet these human-like ETs to just discuss that he had some sort of connection with them, either his soul or something related to them in general. That's why they were picking him to meet up. But yeah, they would take him on board, show them how things worked, and beautiful, clear pictures of these UFOs coming in to meet him, basically.
Yeah, actually reports that he'd been having telepathic contact with these ETs, if you like, or these others, since he was about 5 years old. And although he had a very poor education, he was well known as being quite something of a mathematician, very good at physics, all kinds of things. And he had a particular talent for detecting problems in engines and that kind of thing, way above the usual. And that's what he was very well known for. And he, again, like Billy Meyer, was lived a simple life, and he certainly did not seek publicity or any kind of fame or monetary value from his experiences or sharing photographs. In fact, he didn't share them.
Paul Villa had been asked not to publish the photographs by his contacts who came from Coma Berencies. There was a gentleman by the name of Bob Flora, a United Press International photographer, who was so impressed with the authentic look of the pictures that he put 3 of Paul Villa's photographs on the UPI wire, and they were subsequently printed in hundreds of papers all over the world.
And that caused him a lot of issues because he'd promised ETs that he wouldn't share until after his death his material, because he kept a notebook of. Wendell Stevens wrote a book as well about him.
That's correct.
Once the cat was out of the bag, in effect. But again, Coral E. Lorenzen really, I think she even went and confronted him physically and said, how did you do that? How did you make a model? How did you make that model work and photograph it like that? And even Wendell Stevens says he tried to replicate that there's a tree and you're not seeing some of the branches of the tree. Now, when this photograph was sent to the Air Force to be analyzed, to the head of the Air Force, they said it must be a hoax because the branches aren't where they should be in relation to the craft. And what Paul Villa came back and said was that there'd been a huge whoosh of air as the craft had come in. And so that had swayed the tree. I think that for a while, a lot of people thought that that had to be a hoax. And indeed, the Air Force guy said, not because there was evidence, but because he just couldn't understand how the photograph could have been taken in that way. Not because he saw strings, not because he saw any attachments, you know, holding a model up or anything. So a lot of people think that because that was said by the Air Force from its Project Blue Book. So he really did have a difficult time, and it's such a shame because, you know, it caused him a lot of heartache, and he moved his family into, you know, much more remote location, you know, wasn't happy to speak to people.
Kind of ruined his life.
Yeah, it really did. So for anybody saying that people who do research in this field are just making money and they're just having a great time, I mean, you know, they should try it sometime, see how they feel about the intrusion into their lives and their credibility being questioned, which is often the case. Now, listen, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there aren't those who do hoax material or make it, but you know, I'm not talking to those people.
Right.
But you know, we know that there are plenty of people out there muddying the waters for their own ends, who knows why. But I certainly, in my opinion, like with Maya, I certainly don't think either of those two gentlemen were hoaxing anything. And in my book, they're the real deal. I don't know what you think about that.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Villa, as I said, had been having telepathic contact since the age of 5. And we don't know, I haven't read his books, how often that frequented his life. But we do know that in 1953 was his first full-on contact when he actually met a 7-foot tall human-looking being in Long Beach, California. And when Paul was a little bit scared, and this being called him by name and told him what was in his mind and then told him a lot about his life, he was able to feel comfortable. So then there was this craft, which this guy said, what do you see over there? And he said, yeah, that's craft. And he said, would you like to see? Would you like to go on board? And so Paul Villa said, yeah, I mean, I think I would too. So they went on board and he met these others, absolutely amazing. And he had an amazing time. And I don't know if it was about 2 hours on that occasion that he spent with them, but he said they were absolutely beautifully proportioned people. They looked more beautiful than humans do, and their proportions were, you know, absolutely perfect. And so from that was 53, and then full-on encounter was about 10 years later in 63 and June. And I think this is when he actually met 9 of them. So this was pretty fantastic, absolutely amazing. So this craft landed, and they didn't allow him to take pictures of them, but they did allow him to take pictures, you know, of the craft after they were in it. I don't know why we're not allowed to see pictures of these folks. Anyway, there were 9 of them. There were 5 women and 4 men, and he said they ranged in height between 7 and 9 feet, and they had all manner of different color hair, and it sounded like their hair color was fabulous, everything from sort of burnished gold and copper right through to black. He said they spoke to him in his native Spanish and English, but when they spoke amongst themselves, which is interesting, he said it sounded like a cross, as far as he could tell, between sort of Hebrew and an Indian dialect. Now, I don't know whether he means the Eastern Indian kind of sound or a Native American Indian.
Right.
I would imagine the Eastern Indian. But that was absolutely fascinating. And they helped him with a lot of things in his life, and they gave him a lot of indicators about what would happen, what would go on, and that they also asked him not to publish anything until he had died, like all his notes and that kind of thing, which part of the bargain he certainly kept to. And as I said, it was only somebody else who posted some images worldwide that caused some issues and caused him to basically go underground and not want to speak about the things anymore. There was another encounter in 1965, and there were 3 crew on that occasion, and these guys were smaller. They were about 5'8", 5'9", which is, I think, pretty much average human looking, and again speaking to him in ways he could understand. And again, I don't know, it's about 90 minutes they spent on that occasion. But these, it's not 5 minutes or 2 minutes, and this isn't something like a figment of your imagination. Maybe these are very Adamski-like encounters as well, when he had a meeting with, I think, different looking people, but still human. Perhaps they were more Nordic looking. But absolutely fascinating, isn't it? That I wonder what benefit took away from that, Paul Villa, that is. And well, I think that if he was here and from 5 years old, having those experiences, having that, information and knowledge that there were other. They said they were from the constellation Coma Berencies, which is about 60 million light years. And apparently it includes our galactic North Pole. Isn't it interesting? Apparently it was named, I think in the 1500s, after a queen of Egypt. And because she had such beautiful hair, she said that if her husband, Ptolemy III, came back unharmed from battle, she would, as a gesture of gratitude, cut off her famous beautiful long locks. And I think that the Coma Berenice, the tail has a sort of tail end which looks a little bit like a tail, so they called it Coma Berenice, and Coma is hair in Latin. So
very fascinating.
I love all these little details and interests. Going back to Coral Lorenzen and her encounter with Paul Villa, I don't think she was able to get very far when she was saying, how did you hoax that then? I mean, there wasn't even a question in her mind as far as I can. So you can't really judge a book by its cover, and you honestly can't accept as fact either certain parties who may have invested interests in keeping the status quo, i.e. the public ignorant, like the Air Force, like the Army, like the Navy, of, despite what's coming out these days with the Nimitz and the Tic Tac and all the rest of that, you think, well, what aren't they telling us? Anybody crying hoax? It may be, but it may not be. And to look a little bit deeper under the layers, and also the character of the people say it all, because the Berenicens said to Paul Villa, and I think this is what I'm hearing everywhere when you get to the actual kernel of the matter of the information or the message, and this is that love is the most powerful energy in the universe, or many universes, and that if only mankind would stop or move from the status of this aggressive, belligerent status or instinct, they actually said if love is used properly and it moves the heart of humankind, and that frequency would be picked up by these others. And they said to Paul that there would be many different beings coming to Earth if we were able to do that, to change our orientation and instinct from warmongering and aggression to love, that they would also then be very happy to share their higher sciences with us. So what a nice idea that is.
Again, ever since I've been starting this, a lot of people from Wisconsin have been hitting me up with their sightings and personal experiences. So
that's great.
Again, I'm going to send them your way. All right, if anybody's watching this and from Wisconsin that want to reach out to Joanna, she would love to hear your stories.
You can also keep a record of them, Dustin, keeping a little journal of what folks share with you. Have you had anything else happen to you? Any sightings or?
No sightings, unfortunately. But again, I've just been getting nothing but awesome feedback from the last interview.
Great.
Everything positive, really dealt with anything negative. It's awesome. I love it.
Have you been surprised at the positive feedback you've been getting?
Yeah, it's awesome. From people who are kind of like non-believers to the people who are kind of so-sos, or just, have more questions, and they see that I'm so involved in it now.
Yeah. What about your family? Do they? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My family's very happy and very supportive. Yeah.
That's great.
They're very interested. Yeah.
That's lovely. Please keep me posted as to other original material that comes your way and that you acquire. I think it's great because you're becoming a custodian of some very important images. And I think that's a really lovely thing to have. And I'm really grateful that you're doing it. Many thanks to you, Dustin Schutta, for
thank you.
sharing your time. and sharing your lovely original photographs, even from the UK. All right, Dustin. Well, that's over and out from the ET Newsroom, and we shall be seeing everybody else shortly.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye, folks.